Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym.
Anthony McGowan is one of the most widely acclaimed young adult authors in the UK. His books have won several major awards and been shortlisted for many more. He has written highly regarded adult fiction and non-fiction, as well as books for younger readers. He has a PhD in the history of beauty and has taught philosophy and creative writing. He lives in London with his wife and 2 children, and his sometime co-author, Monty the dog. Tony, you and I met when I really pretty much forgot I didn't already know you, because it was an event for The Art of Failing. So that would have been 2016, 17?
Yeah, was that the book group that I came and chatted to? Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that.
It was really, really lovely. And I just read it. I then asked you a question that was around how you decided what stayed in and what didn't. I can't remember what the question was, but I do remember your answer was, oh God, is that still in there?
Well, I mean, the first draft of that book was actually at 250,000 words. So it was huge. I had to trim it down to 70,000. So it's quite a long negotiation with my editor. He wanted a lot of the filth taking out. I wanted the filth keeping in. So
you did what we all have to do, which is compromise.
Compromise, exactly. I suppose I resist up to a point and then I collapse. So once a retreat starts, it becomes a rout, and I let them have everything. Oh, the occasion I used to sometimes put in stuff that I knew the editor would take out. This is more of my teenage fiction. And so I thought I'd have those bits which I didn't mind losing, so I could then keep my core.
I have so many questions on that I will be scribbling while talking to you and making sure that I remember them all. Because one of my favourite things about writing, which potentially for some people is the most terrifying thing, is that one is never absolutely sure. So that thing about what do I push back on? What do I not? And because you are so successful in adult, teenage, children, fiction, non-fiction, I'm wondering if that feeling of what do I keep in, what do I not, does that differ per audience, or is that just a basic human thing?
You know, it's a very good question. Maybe got a general answer to that, which is that I have strong views about what I want to be in, but that isn't necessarily the right view. So when you first write something, as you know, you feel incredibly passionate about it. You think it's great, or you maybe think it's terrible, but you feel strongly about it. And you're not always entirely rational about what you've produced then. And so that's when you need a good editor to have that more objective view. But also then time helps you to be more objective. So later on, 2 years down the line, you might realise, oh crap, that was awful. I shouldn't, I should have taken that out. So yeah, I think it's vital for you to feel strongly about your work when you first write it, or else you wouldn't ever bother doing it. But then it's good to have that other view to try and make things feel that be closer to objectivity.
You remind me of the conversation that I have about writing for yourself, writing for a reader with people who are just beginning. A lot of the Writer's Gym is about people finding that confidence, which really is focus, that courage. And it's about finding the right reader to talk to in your head, isn't it? That relationship with the right editor.
Yeah. But also, I suppose, I don't know if this is a bit tangential to your point, that I think that when you start out, maybe all the way through, I think you need 2 contradictory things to be writing. I think you need this slightly insane, grotesque ego, this total self-belief that makes you write it in the first place. If you didn't have that, why would you do it? Because it's quite a big thing to ask. You're expecting other people to spend a week or a month of their lives in your book, in your head. And so you need to have that self-belief, or else you just wouldn't do it at all. But if you've only got that, you're a monster. So what I also think then is that counterbalancing voice saying, no, you're terrible, you're rubbish, you don't know what you're playing at all. And for me, I need that oscillation between you're a genius, you're an idiot. And that's where the kind of creative vibe, what energy comes from.
And there's a lot of your material that really, really reflects that. And this is why I so enjoy your writing, because you're just such a great example of somebody who the conversation they're having in their head really encourages me, because it feels like somebody knowing exactly who they are and what they enjoy, what they're having fun. So with how to teach philosophy to your dog, what I love about that is the conversations, and actually I guess that's where I came in a way with The Art of Failing, is that conversation between confidence, lyricism, fluidity, and the what the am I doing, that I think we all have. You seem very accepting of that. It's all those jigsaw pieces seem to fit together really comfortably when you're talking to yourself or to Monty.
Yeah, I guess. But am I going to undermine that view? Maybe
Go
slightly.
for
But,
it.
well, because it's all to do with, maybe this is answering a completely different question, but the different paradigms for being creative, I think. There's one which is that creativity is this kind of internal process, and it's about you finding your voice, and then you produce this beautiful thing, like a lovely Fabergé egg that you then present to the world and expect the world to bow down before it. And that's one part. And a lot of great writers have that kind of view, that it's an internal process. I think I tend more to think about writing as a conversation. So I'm nearly always thinking about the audience. So maybe sometimes it's a version of me, or I'm writing for a teenage version of me, but more often I'm genuinely thinking about my young readers for the YA stuff, or the grown-ups. And I'm always thinking, am I boring you, or am I interesting you? Am I making you laugh? Am I frightening you? So I do think about the other rather than just having this internal conversation. Well, I should stress that I don't think that one way's right, the other way's wrong. And maybe I do a bit of both as well, but there are two different ways of thinking about it.
I can see how, if it works for you, for the writer, it's liberating. But I can also see how I've had some people who kind of blind themselves with, but what if I'm not interesting enough? What if it's too boring? What if it's too weird at the same time?
Of course. But, it's a really good point. And I suppose that the only advice that works for writers is the stuff that gets them writing. and that anything that interferes with that or fills them with too much anxiety, that then it's all a disaster. I just talk about what kind of what works for me. And maybe that goes back again to having enough of that bulbous, throbbing ego to power you through the moments of despair.
I'm going to show you the bookmark that we have, but it's a nice, pretty tree, which
There's 7 basic plots, but there are infinite original voices. Lovely.
And the real reason I picked it up is the top one there. That's what does it for me and for them.
Interested, not you missed. I can't see the end bit of it. Not interesting.
Hang on, that way. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Because the thing that I find just blinds a lot of people. It may, as you say, it is different for every writer, and this is why it's really interesting to compare and contrast what's going on in our heads. But if I am interested in this, if I am laughing at the behaviour, at myself, at what's going on, then yes, I'm talking to the reader, but fundamentally I'm staying true to what's going on for me.
And in a sense that, I was going to talk later on about the importance of having a first reader, like a kind of sympathetic person to first. But I suppose that in fact we are always our own first reader, and if we don't pass that little test, then we're screwed.
If we don't let it past us, we need to get ourselves in the right mood, don't we? Just make sure it does go past. You are now wonderfully successful at basically everything, but which I know is not how anyone feels on the inside of their head.
No.
I love also how much you want to argue with that. Go for it.
Only that, such a bizarre world being a writer. I suppose maybe some of the other creative professions are the same, that you've never made it. You're always on that cusp, that cliff edge. And if your next book doesn't work, then you're in serious trouble. So you're only ever just okay for now, is how I feel about the writing world.
So can you not look back on, I'd pick my favourite, obviously I don't know what your favourites are, or if it's like children that you technically don't have them, or if you do, you keep it to yourself. But can you look back on some of the ones that I love and go, this is now in the world, this now exists, that is in the British Library, in people's heads, in all of the things that it can be in. I've done it. It exists. I have achieved these things so far. Or does confidence, does ego, does whatever it is, just go, that is now not the point?
Well, it's a very, very good point you made there. But I suppose I've written a lot of books now, somewhere over 50. I can't quite, I always lose count at the end, late 40s. But, probably half of them have more or less completely disappeared from the world. They're kind of, if they're not actually out of print, they're on sort of print on demand, and they might sell 14 copies a year. Probably one of my favourite books is a book called Hello Darkness. I changed publisher when I wrote it, and it just sort of fell through the gaps. I love that book, but I've not seen it in a bookshop for 10 years. It's a million in the Amazon charts. So should I feel proud about the fact it's there, or disappointed that more readers don't have access to? I suppose what as a writer I think you really want is readers. You have that craving, that lust to be in other people's heads. And so when it works, when you get there, then everything's great. If you're not in those heads, you're a loser.
And somewhere out there that is inside. And I will be putting a link directly to that book in the show notes. Knowing that we don't always find out whose heads it's in, does that not come into it?
Yeah, again, sort of to attack it from the other side. I suppose when I started writing back at that early stage, which is the most exciting time, when you realise you can basically do it. I think for so many writers, you begin by being an obsessive reader and you long to be part of that world of books. And you never know if you can actually produce a book-like text until you get your fingers working. And so it's a great feeling when you've produced a thing and then you're just excited and the excitement builds if you get published and then, you see it in bookshops. They're all brilliant and wonderful things. But I suppose that intense excitement about just having that book in the world, after a while, pulls isn't the right word. It's still a lovely feeling, but that intense thrill of that right at the start of your career when things are looking okay, you can never quite recapture that. That's why, in a way, I genuinely envy aspiring first-time writers. And that's when I loved writing most of all. I had quite a boring day job, worked for the government, boring and also quite complicated. And just getting away from that and typing was my absolute joy and my passion.
Who were you talking to in your head then?
Well, when I started writing
to.
Well, go back to my first reader. I suppose my girlfriend at the time was you need that one person who has faith in you, and then you get the faith in yourself. So I suppose even though I was writing young adult fiction to begin with, it was kind of to make her laugh. So I had her. But then also, I know plenty of YA writers have said this. I did have that partly of an image of myself as a 15, 16-year-old young reader. So I was trying to amuse and engage him, teenage Anthony McGowan, and my current girlfriend. And then did I think much beyond that? I don't know.
Really lovely to hear that you have that sort of envy or that affection for what it feels like to be starting off, either then or now, or maybe both. What has supported or motivated you?
Well, obviously, alcohol is always a friend in. No.
And coffee. Are you a coffee person?
Yeah.
I'm a massive coffee person.
I can't do past midday there. I don't sleep. I suppose that, maybe to repeat what I said before, that first of all, we all begin as readers and as book lovers. And I suppose that my longing to be part of that thing that we adore has always been a big motivator, being part of that world of literature and language. I think that ultimately the thing that keeps me going is that I know that I don't suck at it. Just that ability when I'm writing to put thoughts into an interesting and engaging form. I don't think I'm deluded when I say I can do that. I've always been, in that kind of naive sense, quite good at writing. What I love about writing is that, like all of us, my head is full of thoughts and ideas, and I'm not the world's, as you can tell, the world's most articulate person. I talk in woolly...
can I?
In woolly half sentences and bizarre ejaculations.
I just want to say to posterity, because I'm not letting that one through, if I had to name on the fingers of one or both hands the most articulate people I knew, he'd be on there.
No, but if you actually transcribe my words, it's like Harold Pinter. It makes no sense at all. Or
okay, so
Finnegan's Wake. But when I get a little bit of that space that writing gives you, and then I can turn that rambling, incoherent nonsense into something a bit less rambling and a bit less incoherent.
You're wonderfully undermining your point by phrasing it so well. You do know that, don't you?
Sorry.
But don't be.
I've deconstructed myself.
Yep, that is something else that I think we do learn to kind of juggle, that we are constantly deconstructing ourselves. And for every argument, there are three other ways. It happens in coaching, it happens in psychotherapy. You get very good at not being angry with other people because you can see all possible ways and so on and so on. But what I suppose I'm aiming at with that is hearing you use the phrase, I can now say I'm quite good at writing. I have had almost probably every author I've spoken to in this series has mumbled the prizes that they've won and declared how, I think there's always this thing that I almost have an I Spy book in my head of everybody thinking, I'm not a real writer. That they're a real one. I'm just pretending. That does seem to keep going on. So shall we name prizes just to see if it still works? Particularly as the main one. I've never quite known which syllable you pronounce it on. So I'm actually fudging in the hope that you say it before I have to.
Are you talking about the Rotherham Children's Book Prize, 2011, where I came third? Is that the one?
No,
it's Rotherham.
No.
Yeah, okay.
But we're getting closer.
My best moment as a writer was winning the Carnegie Medal. So, yeah, that was my pinnacle, I suppose, of my career, because the Carnegie's a genuinely wonderful prize in that you get shortlisted by librarians, but then literally thousands of school book groups around the country read your stuff and feedback.
Do you want to talk a bit about the book and Barrington Stoke and the situation?
Yeah, so a bit of history. So my first few YA books, quite unusual. I mean, they're very over the top, very elaborately constructed, very complicated language. I think quite funny, but also incredibly rude. There's an awful lot of toilet humour. And that was, I suppose, when I was most writing for that teenage version of me. And what I wanted to do in the books like Hellbent and Henry Tumour and Hello Darkness, and to a lesser extent, The Knife That Killed Me, I was trying to really rev up the intellectual energy, put in lots of complex ideas, and then try and bribe my young readers into enjoying it by having lots of toilet jokes. So I realised after a while I was doing something which isn't always the best thing for a writer or a human being to do. I was doing a lot of showing off. I was trying to prove how good I was at intertextuality and complicated metaphors. And then I started working with Barrington Stoke. Now, Barrington Stoke are a small Scottish independent publisher, initially set up to produce books for people with dyslexia. And so that they're formatted really beautifully and make it easy for people with dyslexia to read them. They slightly then widen that into reluctant readers. And that's when I got involved. So what the kind of remit, I suppose, is to do age-appropriate content, but in a more accessible form. And so what this did was to make me pare down my hugely over-the-top language and focus on the things that those readers really care about, which was characters they want to love and care about, and a world they can understand, and a plot that makes them want to cry at the end. Well, that's exciting and engaging. So I wrote for them, and it definitely made me a better writer, I think, by just being more straightforward, more focused. So I wrote a series of books called Truth of Things as a series, Brock, Pike, Rook and Lark, about two boys in the north of England in very difficult circumstances. The older brother, Kenny, has learning difficulties. So his younger brother...
we're in Lark at this point.
Yeah, Lark is the fourth in the trilogy.
Just to make sure that we know which book, so that the beginning...
I told you I rambled incoherently. So there's 4 books about these two brothers, tracing their development from terrible poverty into just about being okay. And the 4th is Lark, which concludes the series, and it then takes us forward into the future to explain why these books exist at all. But it's a kind of adventure story, Lark. 2 boys go on a walk in the North Yorkshire moors, get lost in a blizzard with their little dog, and they don't all make it out alive. So it is, I don't think anyone's read it without crying at the end. So really hard, as you know, to say which is your best piece of work. But I suppose most people think that Lark is one that is the best. And I knew at the time that it'd come out right. You know, when you do something and yeah, that's as good as I can do. And I felt that about Lark. It probably took a month to write. So it just came out and I didn't really have to change anything at all. So but I knew the characters so well by that stage and the world. So yeah, that was a book that won the Carnegie Medal, my greatest moment, but also slightly poignant because I won it in 2020, right smack in the middle of lockdown. So I didn't get to go to the big award ceremony with cheering crowds and make a, heart-rending speech and thank you all. But anyway.
I had, not similarly in terms of awards, but similarly borderline ironic in that I'd been complaining to everybody it's so ridiculous that I have to go to Hull for my PhD viva when the external examiner works literally across the road, and we were both going to have to go from London to Hull.
Oh, no.
And I'd been complaining about that to everyone. And then guess what? God went, fine, Rachel. You don't have to go to Hull because you won't be allowed to legally. And then it was like, that wasn't what I was asking for. I didn't. So yeah, we both managed to cause lockdown somehow.
Oh, brilliant!
I hope the future understands irony. I didn't mean that.
You had your viva though, didn't you? And
I did,
okay,
on my
yeah.
sofa in my living room. I just had
brilliant.
to point the computer at the carpet to show I wasn't cheating and had got notes. Yeah, it was great. So definitely be careful what you wish for is of practical use. But I don't know if it was the same for you, that it is very sad that it did mean missing being in person with people. But I don't know if this is far too much silver lining, but I just wondered with lockdown, because suddenly there was so much literary community and events sort of at your fingertips. Did other things come out of that, or was it just a big no?
No, I mean, I in some ways I kind of loved lockdown. The whole family was here. We had rather a nice time, and it was kind of interesting just wandering through those post-apocalyptic streets. I used to cycle around the middle of central of London, and it just was so much like is it 24 weeks after all. It's like the apocalypse had happened. So this is, I know it's a terrible thing in many ways, but we had quite a good lockdown. I got, got work done, and it was kind of okay. But
your co-author Monty, he must have loved it, because we could still walk. We
could, yeah. He was our excuse to get out, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it did bring sort of people and families together. It does seem like a very authentic way of illustrating that conversation we're always having in our heads. And
yeah, I guess.
I suppose what I do love is it is quite genre blending doing that, because I was thinking with The Art of Failing, the fact that here are the different interpretations of my behaviour to me. The reason I'm laughing now is I realised I actually reread that in the same week that I was reading Lark, and after The Art of Failing I was physically laughing so much that my whole face was I couldn't breathe on the second diary entry. And then the next time I'm reading Lark, and I just have to say, well done, you bastard. That's just the absolute ends of emotion. But what it did feel like it had in common was that sense of the different sides of the mind talking to each other. I mean, the thing I'm thinking of, if I'm honest, is the gym ball. May I spoiler this?
Yeah, of course.
May I spoiler this for readers? Because I so recognised it. So the character, let us call you, is looking in the window of the shop and sees a gym ball, but because of the way the gym ball, the lettering of GYM looks, it looks like Bumble. And then the character, because we're always characters once we're on the page, is walking with his wife, Mrs. McGee, and says to himself, Bumble, because that is what he's reading. And she doesn't react, so he says it again a bit louder. And he gradually, as this continues, realises that she isn't there and that she's somewhere else down the road. And then has the choice of either stopping or continuing what he has started. And the way each thought has this logical explanation underneath it. I look at the way we mess things up for ourselves. It's not often because we're underthinking, it's because we're overthinking. And it was such a testament to overthinking articulate. I just absolutely loved it. I can't remember what my point was.
Just how great I am, I guess. But I suppose maybe we should explain to your listeners what The Art of Failing is, because it's kind of a memoir stroke writer's journal or diary, but its origins, sounds terrible, was actually in my Facebook posts. So, for 15 years I've been doing this, and I kind of realised that people were quite liking my little quirky stuff. So I did kind of invent this character who's obviously in real life incredibly suave and smooth, utterly cool really, but I invented a slightly more bumbling version of myself, and it's his daily travails and his wrestling with existence. But what it made me do though was to view my own life as a writer slightly from the outside and just see how I could turn these ordinary experiences into something that somebody else might want to read and find amusing. Again, this maybe goes back to again those first readers, because it was kind of public and a bit exposing. You would get the ones that people would like, and they do their likes or smile or respond, and the ones that didn't, that seemed to bore people. Anything about cricket, obviously, I would get 0 likes. And so, it kind of evolved then over time. It was meant to be me genuinely trying to turn that stuff of the world into words, but also trying to be funny, partly inventing a version of me and also my family. But I suppose it was both me trying to be as true as I could to the world, but also trying to turn that truth into something funny. So occasionally I turn up the dial a bit to make it a bit more intense. One of the strangest passages in The Art of Failing is it's when I was walking down the Finchley Road with my dog on this kind of slightly gothic, tempestuous night with the trucks roaring by and the rain hammering down, and I heard this pounding behind me, and Monty was kind of whining, and what it was in the book I use the term dwarf, but pounding down the pavement towards on crutches as if he was being pursued. And then just when he got to me, he stopped and looked up, and I looked down at him, and we had exactly the same face. And so he became my dwarf doppelganger, Heimlich. And I wrote this and no one believed it. And my wife didn't believe it. My kids didn't believe this was a real thing. They thought it was one of my little whimsical episodes. I occasionally see again Heimlich in the area. And then one time I was out for a walk with the family, and he was there. And I said, look, that's Heimlich, my dwarf doppelganger. And they all looked and said, oh my God, yeah, he looks exactly like a small version of you. So that's one case where it was what seemed most surreal and strange was in fact very reality adjacent.
And that reality adjacent quality is what I do think is so important about fiction and memoir, is understanding that it's not about deciding rationally intellectualizing in your head, this is fiction or this is memoir. It's about freeing yourself to use the material and then decide why the story wants to tell itself.
Yeah, of course. I don't think there's any piece of fiction that doesn't involve a strong truth quotient. We always use our, experiences, the stuff around us.
In the Writers' Gym, we talk about it as a paint palette, that no painter has ever gone, I'm not allowed to mix that kind of orange with that kind of yellow because it might offend my mum. Whereas as writers, we have the opportunity to do that quite a lot.
Yeah, I should say that my worst ever experience as a writer was in one of my early novels. I put some very recognisable real people in there and thought, although there were fairly complex, rounded portraits with good mix of good qualities and less good, and I thought that would be okay. When these people recognised themselves in this book, I'm afraid that was utterly friendship ending, because all they read was the critical bit, and so that was a big mistake. Don't do it, young writers out there. Or disguise them more carefully.
Disguise them more. The thing is, and argue by all means, but I guess what I felt like I was hearing in that is, as with cooking, the story needs to work out why it's telling itself. If you're not fictionalizing properly, then you're not necessarily getting to why you needed to tell it in the first place, or if it's not like whatever it was you wanted to say about them, so that it's not he's got silly ears, so it's not just a pointing exercise, it's what am I trying to say with this? And I just wonder if that was a bit raw, if that was a bit, I've done photorealism the end, I've put them in there.
Well, I think I did change them in some respects, but I think that what it was maybe a slight moral failing, maybe a moral failing that all novelists have, in that I prioritised the work over the life in a way, and because I could use these to make a better book, I thought, fuck it, I'm going to, and I shouldn't have. or should I don't know. Are you allowed to be a monster if what you produce is a decent book at the end of it?
And summon Monty, because that is a very good question. But at the same time, and don't give me examples, because obviously by the nature of what I'm about to ask you, you're not going to want to. But as you continued in your career, were there examples where you did draw from life but mix the colours more mixily, so that we don't find out who it is? That you get what you need without it showing who that actually was.
Yeah, but I suppose in my YA, nearly all the characters in there are kind of based on people that I knew when I was at school. So because of qualities of time and failing memory, that they're far enough away from those origins to be not really recognisable. But also, I think, I would defend that as an okay practice, that to use those experiences of real people. And none of the characters in my book are straightforward representations of those earlier people. They're blended together or twisted or whatever, or amalgamated.
And memory will have already done that for you after a certain point anyway, because even if we wanted autobiography to be neutral, it's not going to be. It can't be.
Writers obviously always talk about this term experience. You use your experiences, but I do prefer the concept of memory, which is experiences, stuff that happened that get in your mind and get contorted and twisted by those
and filtered through
forces.
you.
Exactly.
Yeah. But we have used some rather unsavoury metaphors for that I think are pretty exact. That, your experience of life comes into you and then, you develop, it needs to leave again as writing.
This seems like a very Anthony McGowan kind of metaphor.
This from the man who wrote The Bear Bum Gang.
Okay. So we're in the lavatory, are we? Damn, shame on you, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't invent the phrase vomit draft, Much as I wish I had, it's a damn healthy metaphor that the first thing is get it out. The second thing is break the metaphor completely by moving all of the bits around. But, it's true though, isn't it? I mean, getting this stuff out of ourselves is important, whatever image we use for it.
It is in fact incredibly complicated. Like I'm guessing you and most of your listeners, back in my teens, I began to really enjoy writing. I wrote terrible poetry to try and impress girls, never worked. But I kind of, began to think that my life might involve words in some kind of way. But I spent a lot of time at university, did various degrees. By the 1990s, I was in London with a terrible job that I was talking about. And still this idea that I wanted to write something. So I wrote my first novel book called Hellbent, which is about a teenage boy who dies and goes to hell with his dog. And it's about their various kind of adventures there. It's a kind of comic fantasy about the nature of good and evil and right and wrong. Thought it was a masterpiece, sent it off. Don't think I knew what an agent was then. Sent it to, Faber and every other publisher I'd heard of. Got either silent or generic rejections. Dear sir, stroke madam, your book, stroke play, delete as necessary. And that was quite depressing. I knew it had a kind of energy and a something. So then I then took a swerve, and it's just when chick lit was taking off, and I became a woman, and I wrote a piece of chick lit, which got an agent basically the next day. I sent it off to a few agents.
Blimey.
And it's based on the synopsis in 3 chapters. And it got, there's an auction, again, based on that synopsis in 3 chapters. And suddenly I had quite a big book deal as a woman. Have I told you that before? I must have done. No. Okay. But my life was very complicated then for various, I can't go.
Is it still out? Is it out there, or is that something you can't tell me?
I think it's out of print now. I mean, the book deal I got was pretty much the same as all my subsequent book deals put together. So it was it was definitely a life-changing book deal, but not as me. And I had to keep the whole thing quiet, so no one knew that I'd had this book out there. But then, as a woman, I guess it's all sounding really bizarre, isn't it? I had an agent, and my agent then took me on as a man.
Same agent.
Without knowing that I was also a woman.
That you were 2 of their clients.
Yeah. And then,
wow.
So honestly, aspiring writer, don't do what I did. And so that agent then sent out Hellbent again. And now because it was sent out by an agent, it got much more respectful refusal still. But then that agent suggested I write something more sensible, because, Hellbent is a deeply strange book. So I then wrote a crime novel called Stag Hunt, which she sold, again, based on 3 chapters and a synopsis, but sold to Hodder and Stoughton. That was published. And then, because I was now a published writer, she sent out Hellbent again, and that was then taken up because I was no longer this total loser outsider. So now I had sort of 3 careers: as a woman, as an adult crime writer, and as a YA writer. But I mean, Stag Hunt, I think it's a good book, but it had a little sad story. The hardback came out, got nice reviews, looked beautiful. Paperback came out, looks amazing. Tesco's bought tens of thousands of these things. So it's going to be on Tesco shelves. When it got to them, the barcode had been misprinted, and so it wouldn't ping. And so they sent them all back. And so Hodder and Stoughton got stuck with 40,000 unsellable copies of my, which is the one thing publishers can't abide, having to warehouse, suddenly it's money. And I went from being their sort of young, hot thriller writer to being the loser that got them stuck with all this warehouse full of, they were all pulped in the end. So that kind of killed my crime writing career. But luckily the YA stuff took off slowly, because my type of YA
this was under your name. This was
under my name, yeah. And as a woman, I sort of withered away somewhat.
I realise this is a tangent, but briefly, when you said don't try this at home to the people listening, I'm just not sure if I agree, because when the Brontes did it, when a bunch of women had pen names as men because that was what society was saying would get you there, I don't really see a difference. I mean, if that was what got a good story into the world, I don't really see any difference.
Okay. Well, I suppose...
With a question mark at the end.
Yeah. One difference is that they were some of the greatest English prose writers. I mean, Wuthering Heights is my favourite novel. I think it's an utter and total masterpiece. So they always knew that they were producing great work. Whereas as a woman, I was trying to... Hang
on. They always knew they were producing great work. I have spoken to... Oh. Look, I'm not going to sit here and
scholars, am I wrong?
I've spoken to Anthony McGowan, Kim Newman, Gabrielle Kent. I could name so many people who have done things that have been recognised, shall we say, as very good. Okay? I don't necessarily think that just because people are a long time dead, that they weren't sitting around going, "Oh, I'm not a real writer. That's a real writer over there."
It's a fair point. But they were producing serious fiction, whereas as a woman, I was producing commercial fiction. So, I was trying to write the best commercial fiction I could.
Do you remember what they were saying about novels? Do you remember what was said about Wuthering Heights
at the time?
Sensationalist.
Okay.
I'm going to stop arguing with this, but I still feel quite strongly that there is a self-image thing about writing going on in all of that, because Emily Bronte got called, well, all of it, as sensationalist novels would delete women's brains, that sort of thing. Yeah,
but I suppose the question was, should someone try to do what I did, which was to disguise and change their identity in order to get published? Like Alice Bell, it's going to be just write the best book you can as yourself is probably the best number one. Well, that's what I thought I did. I failed in doing that. So it was then a kind of last resort to do this, to become a massive liar.
And maybe there is something in for some people, the freedom it gives you to have somebody else's name.
You know
on
what?
it.
Nobody ever didn't think I was a woman as from the writing. And I think, I think it was weirdly liberating becoming a woman and not being stuck with poor old Anthony McGowan anymore. I could be a completely different person. So maybe you should do it. Maybe I'm totally wrong and that this is the way ahead. I don't know.
I mean, I think because I do think it's interesting and I do think it's important, just finding what liberates us, gets us writing. That is fundamentally a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So building creative confidence. So the way that when I look back on things that I wish somebody, preferably me, had told me, it does tend to be about the fact that confidence isn't something that necessarily the grown-ups out there are fundamentally feeling, I am now a confident person. It is more about focus on what makes you interested, get it out there, know that everybody else is as imposter syndrome filled as one can ever be oneself. Has that been a way you talk to yourself, or what has it been for you to feel like, is it, and I have a right to my voice now, or has it changed as your career's grown?
Well, I think that was crucial back when I started writing in the 90s to have that bit of self-belief. And there it came from the fact that that the words were flowing quite easily back then. But when it was a thing I did purely for love, I mean, it's much harder for me to squeeze words out now. So then having that little bit of self-belief fueled by being okay at the level of the sentence gave me the energy to carry on. Plus that first reader, my lovely girlfriend Lynn, saying, yeah, this is actually really funny. So that little, then you get in a positive feedback back loop. Now it's not an important part of my life. Now it's my damn job. I've got to sit in a room and type or I don't get paid. So I think there's a difference between me as a young aspiring writer and me as the old fart, that now it's a thing that I do. But that energy is definitely not quite there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. It was crucial then. It's not so crucial now.
Can I ask about writing routine? Because although we know there's no right or wrong, it's always really interesting for people to know what works for other people.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of writing routine, times of the day, you mentioned typing, so it felt like you're not a first draft by hand person, or
No.
Yeah.
So in my glory years, my day consisted of me getting up, pottering around and going to the British Library to write. So I would get out of my house. So the British Library was like an office. Did you ever work in the British Library?
Yes.
Okay.
Until lockdown, I thought I couldn't work at home.
It went a bit crap in lockdown. But and that for me was the perfect environment because it's quiet and scholarly and you can focus on your work. But at the same time, every 20 minutes, you can stretch and look around and look at the eccentric old geezers and, this. So you get that perfect combination of a bit of variety, but also peace.
See first page of The Art of Failing.
Right. Plus you're getting out. I think that act of going to work was quite useful. Now, I think with lockdown, first of all, and then after that, I got a teaching job. So I lost that routine of always going to the British Library to work. I've just taken redundancy from my teaching job. So I plan from July to get back in that at least three days a week in the British Library with my packed lunch and my depressive thoughts. So, in terms of routine, it was always best for me to get out of the house and go somewhere else. And when I was there, my job was to produce those words. In the past couple of years, I've been in this room typing, and it's not as good.
Because now it's not Rosie's room anymore; it's your room.
Yeah, but also there's always, if you're at home, there's always stuff to do. You've got to do the laundry or your hoovering, whereas when and that can fill up the whole day. So with just pointless chores.
Okay, as a former employee of a cat, I now shut the door. My writing routine is the door shuts in the morning. My partner understands that this is not personal. This is just, I need a shut door in order for my brain to function. That's just what I need. So the door shuts, Rachel does things, and unless it's an emergency, that's it. And then we come out in the evenings. We both work from home. Has it been like that for you? You're a dog owner or vice versa. And how does that work? Because when the cat was my boss, I was less productive, if I'm honest, at home. He was relevant to the proceedings.
Yeah, well, we have help. So my wife's parents live round the corner, not far away, and they're both quite elderly, and they love Monty. And so my father-in-law comes round at 9:30 every morning, collects Monty, takes it to their house, and he has a nice day with them, and then comes back. Sorry. Did I call
You
Monty
itted him.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry, Monty.
itted him.
Well, you know, we have
I
a
won't tell.
complex,
I won't
we have
tell.
a complex relationship, Monty and I,
Yeah.
because I'm his least favourite person in the family. So
Are you?
he puts up with me. He loves he's meant to be my daughter's dog in that way that, you buy your kids a pet and they promise they'll feed it and walk it and pick up its crap. But do they? No, they don't. Exactly what you're saying, that a dog would fill up all your free space in the day. But luckily he's dog sat during the day, so I can work.
But genuine question, boundaries at home can be hard for people, I think. I mean, without asking you to say anything that you don't want to say, but has your experience given you any sense of this is what I need and this is where the hard boundaries are in terms of space and time?
No. I mean, back when I started, that would be when would have been most important, to get that momentum going as a writer, and giving yourself that, whether you need 3 hours or 5 hours or even an hour in the day where that's all you're doing. But I suppose I hate my day job so much. I was, didn't have kids back then, so it's fine. I could go back to my flat in the evening and work. So it was entirely achievable then. And I think I'd had enough of a momentum built up now. So when, in fact, the family life became increasingly complicated, I could actually just work around it. I never did what you do, which is incredibly sensible, which is to shut the door and shut the world out. This is me writing now.
I never used to. This has come through more confidence, more sense that my partner understands. And I guess you've got something similar because your wife is also a writer.
Yeah, well, she's mainly an LSE academic. She's a university lecturer,
but fundamentally understands writing.
Yeah. And a good person. So we did write a book together called How to Teach Economics to Your Dog, because she's an economist stroke management person. So, I did the fluff and she did the hard core of it.
What does one need in order to get it done? And I guess tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, but when it was the British Library, I work there, I come home. Mm-hmm. Whereas when it's at home, lockdown, I guess you find ways.
I'm quite good at squeezing things into corners, and it's definitely a second best to having that time when I'm just working. So, because I've been teaching for the past 2 years, in theory it was part-time. But in fact, partly because of my own inefficiency, it was full-time plus.
Expands to meet the space, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've written very little over the past couple of years. I mean, last summer I managed to write 2 short books, the Beck, which came out last month, and another book called The Birds of the Badlands, working title, which comes out early next year. But that's, I managed to turn those out in my 3 summer months off. But apart from that, I couldn't write anything at all.
And that is the way gym equipment works, that, you age 20, what you churned out would not be the quality that what you churn out when you know what you're doing is. I guess. Well, I mean, it's for you to say, obviously, but
there's I think for me there's been that balance. Obviously, get better technically as a writer, but maybe those energy reserves are gradually depleted. So I don't know if there was ever a perfect sweet spot when the energy was still high and the technique had been polished. Now I'm definitely the other way. My energy's close to zero.
Well, I have asked many things, some of them more relevant than others, but it's so interesting to hear what works for the individual. I just wondered before we start coming to an end, is there any particular habit or writing exercise or ritual that sort of does it for you?
Yeah, well, I suppose what I've tried at various times is to do more journaling, and like you all, I have my writer's notebook, a variety of them, different sizes, and I tend to, I'll get a new notebook and a new pen, and I have a period where I kind of fill it out. And then after a couple of months, I tend to lose interest in it. But I think that definitely does help to think I've got to write something longhand every day just to get something, just get the muscles moving.
That's interesting, because you when I said so you type first draft, you said you type, but actually there is as well as the stealth writing, there is the rough. The notebook level.
It tends to be little scrappy half ideas, some of which might turn into something, most of which don't. But just the act of writing longhand an actual book, again, it seems healthy and it seems good and seems enriching of my verbal world, in a way that's just hammering away with my 2 fingers at the top tip actually for early career writers is learn to touch type. Because I guess that can you touch type?
Yes.
I can't, and it would have saved me literally thousands of hours if I just bothered. Every couple of years, I think I'll have a go. I'll spend a day trying to learn to touch type, but do that. It's a great thing. I'm really jealous people can do that as opposed to.
You're making me appreciate that I did that possibly for the first time, because I did do secretarial training, aged goodness knows what, aged not very. And you're absolutely right. It's been
no one ever regrets learning touch type ever.
Are you a word doc person, or are you because people say this to me about Scrivener? Oh yes, it takes ages to learn it, but blah blah blah, and I don't want to.
I tried nearly everything, but I always come back to Word. It just is easy. I suppose so. I mean, Scrivener is there's too much going on. There's a simplified version of Scrivener. It's not a version of it. It's an alternative called Storyist. Which I think is just on the Mac, and I've written a couple of books on that, and it's like a halfway house. It's got a bit of the complexity of Scrivener, and a bit more like just a standard word processor like Word, but still, it all feels like a waste of energy learning those things when you can just hammer it out in Word. But again, it's some people love it, so there's no hard rules here. It's worth to download the trial version of these things. It might just be that it exactly fits the way your mind works. It doesn't particularly with me. But have a go with Storyist. Storyist is a simpler version, and I quite like it.
I'm going to ask my secret question, which is, what do you wish I'd asked you that I haven't thought to ask? Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to?
More about cricket?
Do you know, my uncle was genuinely inspired by cricket. I don't understand a word of it, but I'm happy to learn.
Well, I suppose that, again, thinking about it from a writer's perspective, that the danger is that we live our writing lives all the time, that you're always thinking either in a good way or a bad way about writing. You're looking for new ideas, you're terrified about losing it or whatever. And it's really good to have something which is so cut off from that world that's all you think about. So the beauty of, and it could be any sport or playing an instrument, but while you're doing it, it's all you're doing. So when I'm playing cricket, the world and its problems completely disappear. And you're just focused on, and it's a holiday. It's like a little spa treatment for the brain, because you're not thinking about all those other insolvable problems, in your life and in the world. Whereas in something like cricket or playing the guitar, I'm a terrible guitarist.
Snap!
Brilliant.
I'm a terrible guitarist.
But these are solvable problems. That's always, I think that in life, seek out soluble problems, because you get a little satisfaction from that. Fixing a punctured bicycle is in some ways hateful, but at the end of it, you've made a thing that works from a thing that didn't work. That's what, for me, I think every writer needs that space away from writing. And maybe it's just family life or love or the dog, and you're doing that and you're not being us, the writer, with the burdens and the stresses of that.
And at the risk of thinking everything is about writing, it's also good, this focus on mending a puncture or focusing on the ball is going to arrive and I want to hit it. Getting your brain to focus on something. I find it quite I talk about meditation and guitar playing, like it's almost like you're giving your mind a wash. You come back sort of feeling cleaner.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
So cricket is your big writing tip for us, right?
Yes, if I've got another one, I was thinking about this, that whenever I do feel, on the whole, especially when you're a children's writer, you're not really allowed to be blocked, because, most of my writers are friends are adult writers, in the sense that they write for adults. And so they're allowed to write one book every 3 or 4 years or 5 years, because their readers will still be there. But if I spent 5 years writing a book aimed at 9-year-olds, then they're away. They're reading other stuff. So there is that professional job aspect of being a children's writer, that you have to keep on producing it. So yeah, I'm not allowed to have writer's block, but occasionally when I feel blocked or the fluency isn't there, what always helps me is going back to being a reader again. And even as a reader, I've got two different aspects. I've got me reading as a writer, where I'm looking to see how writers achieve their effects. And either I'm literally or metaphorically have a pencil in my hand to kind of think about it. And I think it's utterly vital for a writer to read as a writer and work out, how a great writer has achieved those effects. But sometimes you just need to read as a reader again and rediscover that joy, but do you remember when you were a 12-year-old girl and when you love a book, you so love a book. Yes. And to recapture that, and that again gives you that kind of nuclear power as a reader that drives you through as a writer as well. Without that technical looking for tips from great works, reinvigorating that joy in literature that we have that made us writers in the first place.
And I so hope you have that joy, because where we started from was me asking you, once they're done, does that somehow make it not count? But actually, that's where you're giving that joy to other people, which is wonderful.
You hope so.
Well, I'm definitely one of them, because I have, as I said, been in physical pain due to laughter and absolutely sobbing my skull out at the other. It's so beautiful. Yeah. So highly recommended on all fronts, as your
Thank you, Rachel.
Well, Anthony McGowan, thank you for joining the Writers' Gym.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr. Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.